Hello, my name is Susan Morgan and I'm a textile artist living in Central West Virginia. Today I'm going to show you how to dye some fabric using fiber reactive dyes, which are also called MX dyes or Procyon dyes. We're going to use these tools. We're going to use a sheet of tile, mosaic tile, a piece of foam core board, a foam paint roller, a cookie sheet, and some hot glue. This is the actual mosaic tile sheet that we'll be using today. The first thing we're going to do is just attach the mosaic tile sheet to the foam core board using some hot glue. Very, very simple. Just lift it up. Squirt yourself some hot glue all over there. And get it on there. I try and center it up a little. Now you've got something to make a relief from. I use a padded dye table with a piece of plywood, 3/4 inch plywood, covered with carpet padding, a layer of canvas, and then I top it off with a drop cloth. The first thing you want to do is pin your piece of fabric. It needs to be prepared for dyeing fabric, also called PFD fabric, excuse me. So you're going to want to, I pinned it on the other end. Just going to want to stretch it. And pin it like that. Now it's ready to go. What we're going to do is we're going to take our tile sheet and slide it right under there. We're going to take our roller once I get the dye mixed up and roll it on there to make the imprint of the imprint on the fabric. So hang on there and I'll be right back. Welcome back. I've mixed up my thickened dye. I'm using Dharma's number 22 Cobalt Blue. The dye powder has been mixed into the sodium alginate. Sodium alginate is a thickener. It's a seaweed product. And I needed to add sodium carbonate, also called soda ash, to the thickened dye so the dye will bond with the fabric properly, and I've already done that. Now I've got my fabric pinned out, as you saw earlier, and I've cut my fabric to be about the same size as my tile sheet. So you can get away with doubling your size of your fabric. That's about as much as I go because you're going to have to be sliding this around under there and it gets kind of problematic if you're doing a big piece. So get that slid right under there, and now we're ready to roll our dye on. Now we're ready to roll. I'm going to smear some dye onto the cookie sheet. And now you're going to roll your roller in it. It's always kind of hard to get that baby rolling, so you kind of have to use your fingers a little bit to get it going. You want it to be fairly saturated, but you don't want to see a lot of excess dye sitting on the top of your roller. You want to have control over this. So you can see that's saturated, but there's no dye sitting on the surface of the roller. Now, easy does it. Just start very gently, very gently. You can press down a little harder once you see your image coming up. Very gently. Now I like mine to be a little darker, so I'm going to put some more dye on my roller. Again, don't let it sit on the surface of the roller. Get it absorbed into the roller. And I'm going to make mine a little darker. I like seeing some texture on there. This reminds me of indigo, this color. So you got that. Very simple. Reach under there. Move your tile sheet down. You can see through the fabric, so I'm lining it up under there so it'll fit in with the last one. Looks good. Add a little more dye. And start over again, very lightly. Can always make it darker, but you can't make it lighter. So that's how it goes. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the rest of my fabric, and then I'll get back to you later. We're ready to wait 3 hours for the dye to bond with the fabric. It's called batching usually. What I'm going to do, usually you want to wait about 4 hours for it to bond at about room temperature. I move it up, I make it shorter to 3 hours by covering it up with plastic to keep it damp. You want to keep it damp so that the water can help the dye make its bonding with the fabric. So I cover it with plastic, and I cover it with a heating blanket set on high, and that cuts off about an hour off the batching time. So we'll wait 3 hours, wash it all out, we're done, and tomorrow I'll show you how to do the opposite pattern using corn dextrin. We'll see you then. Hi again. Today I'm going to print the reverse of yesterday's pattern. I'll use the same tile sheet that I did yesterday, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. Sometimes I remove some of the tiles to change the pattern up a little bit. Here I've removed all the center tiles from my tile sheet. With one of them, I made a little stamp, and oftentimes I go back on my fabric when I'm done and stamp back into the centers on this pattern with a different color, and that's a nice effect. Also, be sure and save all these, glue them onto another foam core board in a pattern that you like. So I'm going to get set up. I'm going to mix up my corn dextrin, and then we'll get started. I've mixed up my corn dextrin by whisking 1 pound of powdered corn dextrin into 2 cups of boiling water. This is what it looks like. I've let it cool down to room temperature. Now, just like with the first piece, I'm going to take my tile sheet and slide it under my pinned and stretched fabric on my dye table. put a little bit of dextrin on there. My dextrin has been cooled down to room temperature. Now I'm going to saturate the roller. You really want it to be real well saturated. You don't want, get it worked in, you don't want corn dextrin wet laying on top of the roller, but you do want it to be well saturated. Make sure you get it all over. Okay. Now this time we're going to roll the corn dextrin on. I like to do it firmly. That was probably a little too firmly because I think I might have filled in some of my grooves. So I'm going to do it a little lighter, and that's much better. Make sure you keep your roller wet, but not over, not with excess on there. I'm going to go kind of firmly, but not too firm. I think I'm still pressing too hard. I can look under there. There, that's better. So don't press too hard or you'll fill in your cracks like I did in the beginning, so that's not going to work out too well. Slide it down, line it up again, load up my corn dextrin. I'm going to make sure I don't go too firmly this time. Oh, that's much better. And I'm checking it to make sure that I've gotten a good pattern, kind of touching up any little areas that didn't. I'm just using the light to see. That's much better. I'm not pressing very hard at all. But I do see some spots where it didn't come in contact with the fabric, and I'm just going over that very lightly until it gets covered. Okay, go like that. I'm going to finish up the rest of the fabric. It gets stuck. I don't know if you can see that. I'll just show you. You can see the first part I have put too much on, and I hope you can see the second part where I've done a better job. So I'm going to finish up my fabric. We're going to wait for this to dry. It's going to take, I don't know, 2-3 hours depending on humidity. And when I come back, we'll roll the dye on. The corn dextrin is going to be a resist. It's going to stop the dye that I'm going to roll on later. It's going to stop that dye from penetrating and touching the fabric. So what it's going to do is it's going to just give me dye all around my images and where the cracks were. So we'll come back later and do that. Now it's time to roll our dye over our cloth. The corn dextrin is completely dry. Took about 2 hours. Just like we did before, we're going to put some dye on our cookie sheet. Smear it around. Now when you do this, it doesn't matter how wet your roller is or how thick the dye. You don't want it too bad off, but what you're going to do is you're just going to basically cover your fabric. and wherever that corn dextrin is, the dye will not penetrate. And the fun part of this is when it gets washed out, the pattern is revealed. So I'm going to cover that all up. Okay, so I'm going to continue and cover up the rest of my fabric. I'm going to cover it with a plastic like I did before, cover it with my heating blanket, let it sit and batch for 3 hours, and then I'll stick it all in the washing machine and show you when I'm all done.